I said the nervous system, it's a system which is made up of the neurons or the nerve cells. So this is the structure of a what? Of a neuron. So a neuron has three main parts. The first part is the dendrites. So dendrites conduct impulses towards the cell body. The second part is the cell body. So this cell body carries the nucleus. We know very well that the nucleus carries genetic what? Materials. And then from there, okay, we do have what? We do have an axon as another part of a neuron. An axon carries impulses away from what? Away from the cell body. So the axon is covered by means of myelin sheath. So now the function of the myelin sheath in this axon is to do what? It is to insulate it. The insulation allows impulses to travel very fast. So now, there are three types of a what? Of a neurons. These neurons here have been classified according to what they do. So we have the type of a neuron which is called a sensory neuron. A sensory neuron transmits impulses from a receptor in the skin to your spinal cord, if this is the spinal cord or if this is the brain. Another neuron, it's an interneuron. So interneuron is found right inside the brain or in the spinal cord. It takes impulses from where? From a sensory neuron to a motor neuron. So now, the motor neuron is the last neuron. It takes impulses from where? From the brain or from the spinal cord to the effector. Okay. So now we said that the nervous system is divided into central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So now here we do have what? We do have the spinal cord as part of the central nervous system. These neurons that we have just talked about are found in the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is divided into left and right by means of two fissures which are called the dorsal fissure, the upper one, and then the lower one is called the ventral fissure. So this spinal cord is made up of three main parts, which are the central canal. The central canal contains a fluid which is called the cerebrospinal fluid. This cerebrospinal fluid works in the same way as in the brain. It prevents desiccation. It removes waste from the spinal cord. And then number three, it acts as a what? As a cushion by preventing the spinal cord from doing what? From bumping. So the other part of the spinal cord, it is this H cremator, which has the dorsal horns and the ventral horns. So now, if you don't want to call these horns the dorsal horns, you can call them the anterior horns. And then if you don't want to call these the ventral horns, you can call them the posterior horns. So in these H cremator, we do found mainly the type of a neuron which is called the interneuron. This spinal cord has the nerves which enter it. The top part of a nerve is called the dorsal root. It is inside the dorsal root where we do get a sensory neuron. And then the bottom part of the spinal nerve is called the ventral root. It is inside the ventral root where we do get a motor neuron. So now the motor neuron actually leaves the spinal cord via the ventral root. And then what I didn't talk about is protection of the spinal cord. It is protected again by means of the three membranes which are called the meninges, the dura mater, the pia mater, and the arachnoid. We said, okay, the other thing that I need to talk about, still under the spinal cord, is the two terms which are called a reflex arc and what is called a reflex action. I'll start first by a reflex action. A reflex action is a quick automatic reaction to a stimulus which is received by a receptor. A quick automatic reaction to a stimulus received by a receptor. So another time it's a reflex arc. A reflex arc is a path along which nerve impulses travel from a receptor to an effector to bring about a reflex action. So a reflex arc has 5 components. The 5 components of a reflex arc are a receptor, a sensory neuron, an interneuron, a motor neuron, an effector. Okay. Let me just say, if maybe you put your hand on a burning stove, this is how your body is going to react, or this is how you are going to react to a stimulus. In the skin of your hand, there are heat receptors which are called the Raffine corpuscles. These heat receptors are going to convert a heat stimulus into a nerve impulse. So the nerve impulse will be taken by the sensory neuron, which will now enter the spinal cord via the dorsal root. in the spinal cord, the sensory neuron makes a synaptic contact with an interneuron. So the interneuron takes impulses to a motor neuron that leaves the spinal cord via the ventral root to an effector. So now the effector will contract. When it contracts, you'll start to pull away your hand from a burning stove. So talking about the functions now of a spinal cord, I said it has two functions. The first one, I said that it acts as a pathway for impulses to reach the brain, and then again it acts as a path for impulses to move to the parts of your body. And then from there we said it acts as a center for reflex action, such as knee jerk, withdrawal of an arm, etc.